Mhm. Absolutely.
So welcome to the show officially, Alison. I do appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I know it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. So let's start out with, I suppose, the kind of the obvious and easy starting place. Tell me about where you grew up and what that was like.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and my whole family was pretty much in Ohio, extended family. And I have an older brother and sister, but they're much older. My brother is 7 years older, and my sister is 18 years older. So in a lot of ways, it was like being an only child. You know, my brother was always in the house, but he was so far, ahead of me that he was kind of always doing his own thing, and I was doing my own thing. And my main sport growing up was competitive all-star cheerleading, which a lot of people don't know of, but it's essentially a year-round sport outside of schools. Some schools have competitive cheerleading, but mine was just kind of like a club team, essentially. And yeah, we would travel around the US competing and was at a pretty high level. And that was, my main passion growing up. And when I was in school, I decided that I really wanted to be on Top Gun All Stars, and that was like one of the best teams in the world at the time, and I think they still are. I don't keep up with it as much, and so I was like, well, once I graduate, I'll be free to do whatever I want, so I can move down to Miami and be on their program. And that's essentially what I did. I tried out virtually, luckily made the team. Graduated high school and then moved down to Miami. I started going to school at the University of Miami, and I was on Top Gun All Stars, their international open co-ed level 5. And yeah, that was kind of like a check, like dream come true kind of thing. And looking back on it, when I was younger, before college, I really related to my friends who were on my cheerleading team, very athletic, goal driven, mostly higher achievers. And so those were really like my people. Whereas like I had a harder time connecting with peers at my school. And so when I went to college, though, I kind of felt that like flip flop a little bit. Like I was on my cheerleading team, and of course I had friends there, and but everybody was a little bit older and at that point, and cheerleading was like their main thing, where I was like already kind of like on to the next thing. And I was really found my community at my school. So once I did that for one season, I was like, it just feels better to like retire at this point. Like this is the moment. Like I achieved my greatest goal. And I'm really feeling this calling towards, getting more involved with school and being around more on campus and whatnot, because it was very separate from school. Like it was a far drive. I actually you're not allowed to have a car as a freshman. And so I had to park about a mile away. So I would get done at school, ride my bike a mile to the parking garage, drive my car down the parking garage, drive about 20 minutes 20 miles to cheerleading practice, which in Miami traffic, you never know how long that's going to take. Get done at practice at like 9:30 at night, and then come all the way back home and, go to school the next day. So it was very taxing, and it took a lot of extra effort to do that. But yeah, after the cheerleading worlds in 2012, I was like, all right, I feel good. And like, I had also seen a lot of my friends do it until they didn't like it anymore. And we're
is that a common thing, the kind of the burnout thing? Because I know in gymnastics it's a huge thing. It's like, I'm not saying it's the same sport, but there's kind of a similar almost aspects to it.
I think probably so. I never really did high level gymnastics, but I did high school gymnastics for a couple of seasons. But yeah, I would imagine it's very similar. It's tough physically on your body, and but it's such like most people that do it are so passionate about it, because there's really no money or like glory in it at all. Like most people have never heard of it. You have to pay to do it. There's no sponsors or like things like that. And so the people that do it are really passionate about it. But yeah, I had seen a few of my friends just kind of, you could just tell their heart wasn't truly in it anymore. And it really has to be to do your best. And so I just felt like I was satisfied and was ready to move on to the next thing in my life. And I didn't really think about it too much at the time. I think I've thought about it more now in retrospect, but it was just like, yep, that feels right, And
yeah, it's pretty cool that you had this this ultimate ambition, like this kind of like, this is what I want out of life, and kind of like a childhood dream to get to this point. Like this probably the majority of what you thought about it probably determined a lot of decisions you made, and then you had the peace of mind to go, okay, that's kind of moved beyond it. Was there an event that like that you remember thinking, okay, that is like, now is the time to move on?
Well, it was truly, going back to what you just said, like that is how I at least remember it. Like I had this one track mind vision. Like I only applied to the University of Miami because I was like, I'm going to be on Top Gun. So like, I got to go to school there. And I remember like many people were like, oh, don't you want to like, get some backup schools just in case? And I was like, nope, I'm going to Miami. Like I was just like so tunnel vision on this like dream that I was going to make it come true. And that season was actually pretty tough, because I think it was kind of like going from being not a big fish, but a bigger fish in a small pond to like like a team everyone is extremely talented and very hardworking and very good and like the best of the best. Like I wasn't the only person moving from out of state or traveling a long way to be on that team. Like everybody was doing that. And so it was very different. And I wasn't, I would say one of the least talented people on my team. And so at the beginning of the season, I didn't feel like I was contributing that much to like our routine. I was kind of, I was usually a flyer, but
sorry, what does that mean?
On the person who they, hold up or throw up. Yeah. But I was honestly like on the bigger size of the girls. I was like probably 130 pounds, but some of the other flyers were like 115 pounds or maybe even less. And so they were kind of like naturally selected to be the flyer. So I wasn't even really flying. And I felt like it was because of like, I was just a little bit bigger and they didn't know my skills as well. But I always kind of believed like I deserved a spot to be a flyer. And like, if I just had the chance to show them, like my talent was better than, like my size, I guess. And it's kind of like, looking back on it, it's like a whole, I'm sure this is part of like gymnastics too, like the whole like body image thing, right? Like if I could just be lighter, I could show them like the skills that I have. And how I remember it was just that I was, still showing up to practice, still like working as hard as I could, just kind of like waiting for my chance, to show them. And at the time there was a girl who was kind of struggling in the previous competitions with her flying position. And I just happened to be practicing with one of her bases, and our coach saw us practicing, and it was pretty cutthroat at this level. Like he was basically like, other girl, you're out, and Allie, you're in. And it's like, you're all on the same team, but it's very much like everybody wants that center position, in a way. So it's competitive, but it's also the team as well. And then from there on out, I guess I proved that I was good enough, and I ended up getting to be the flyer in the like center position, which is like the most the spot that everyone wants. So I think that was kind of just like, yeah, what does it get better than that, And we didn't end up winning the world championships that year, which would have been like something that I would have loved to do. That's why you seek out these really competitive teams, is because you want to win the highest competition. But that didn't happen that year for us, but we were still a really good team. And like I said, I felt like that being getting to be the flyer in the center position at the Worlds that year was like, yep, like that's pretty much as good as it gets.
Yeah, that's nice that you came out on a high. Like, okay, we're doing this really, like, I've got to this point, I've achieved these goals, I've moved beyond this. Like, that's really cool. You mentioned something, there's like about 7 points you brought up there. I was furiously scribbling notes. There's 7 points that I want to kind of explore. There's one thing you kind of like mentioned in a passing comment, that you had a kind of hard time connecting to your school peers, but that kind of competitive, that driven environment, that you found it easier to connect to. Just quickly, where are you spending most time at that point? Was it with school peers?
Where was I spending?
Yeah. So was it like spend more time with school peers or more time with?
Are you saying in high school or in college?
Yeah, in high school.
I mean, I was still extremely involved in high school. Like I did every sport. There was not every sport, but I did many sports. I did golf, track, gymnastics, tennis, and cheerleading at school.
Yeah.
And I was part of student government. I was part of drama club. I was part of choir. I was part of, a bunch of different activities. So I was spending a lot of time there, but that's kind of like, sometimes looking back, I'm like, how did I do all of that stuff like, at the same time? So I was definitely very involved in high school, but I just wasn't, it felt more so about like myself. Like I just wanted to do these activities because I enjoyed them. And of course, like I said, I had friends and peers and people that I liked being around, but I just felt like that bigger picture connection, more so to people on my cheerleading team.
That's good. And okay, you mentioned golf there as well. Is that right? Yeah. So I don't think there's a more mental sport than golf, in as much as like there's nothing to react to. There's no kind of like that is it. Like I just wanted to kind of bring it up as an aside. Did you learn anything from practicing golf in terms of mindset, mental health, or kind of focus?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's truly like you versus you. I mean, yes, you're playing against other people, but they're it's totally separate, right? And it's also the kind of sport that is very technical, and obviously physical capabilities and athleticism comes to play in that a little bit, but a lot of the times, like, you feel like you want to just like grip and rip, and then the ball goes like way over here. So it's very much like you have to be calm and almost do the opposite of like what your emotions are like telling you to do. And that's especially true too for like when you're hitting a drive, like most right-handers are gonna like flare it out to the right, because we're like, it's more or less like a baseball swing. And so like when you think like, no, I'm gonna like try to hit it left, like that actually makes the problem of it going right worse. And so it's just like that trusting yourself and trusting the technique a little bit.
Yeah. I learned that lesson the hard way when I went around in 45 over par the other day. So that was a not enjoyable experience, but that must have stood you in good stead for Olympic weightlifting, for kind of for any skill practices you went on.
Yeah, absolutely. And golf wasn't like a huge part of my life. I just played it for one season, but my brother and dad are extremely into golf, and so I would go to the range with them, and I still play every now and then with them, and also like frisbee golf. But yeah, I think all of those sports in a way, contributed to the athlete, of course, that I am today.
Yeah, something that you mentioned a couple of times as well is the family aspect of this. What kind of role did your parents play in your sporting life as a kid?
Yeah, they were always extremely supportive, but I never felt like they were ever like pressuring me into anything. Like it was always like myself, like kind of like I was saying with all the different school activities. I just liked doing all of those things and being busy and being involved and being a part of those things. And so just truly 100% supporting whatever I wanted to do and really believing that I could do it too. I remember I was kind of saying when I kind of put all my eggs in one basket, deciding to move to Miami, some people kind of not that they doubted me, but they would say, oh, you know, like, should you apply to other schools, or like, what's your backup plan, or what's this? And I never felt that from my parents. They, especially my mom, was just like, yeah, like, you can do that. And kind of very similar theme when I graduated college. My degree is in biomedical engineering, and it was kind of at this point where I was getting really into CrossFit and being at Peak 360 with Noah and Guido, and really seeing Noah be one of the first, you know, full-time professional athletes, at least very close to me. I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And very similar thing. My mom was just totally supportive. She was just like, yeah, you'll figure it out. And so just having that, her having the confidence in me gave me confidence to be like, yeah, I will figure it out and I will make it work. Like, this is my passion and this is what I want to go after. And the path is not totally clear right now, but I have the confidence that I will be able to make it work.
It's a funny one, because having a plan B is sometimes a really effective strategy, and sometimes it's a reaction out of fear. It's like, oh, maybe I don't entirely believe in my plan A and whether I'm good enough to execute it. So it's really cool that your mum gave you that kind of self-trust and confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now that I'm older too, especially as a parent, you know, like, you want your kids, you probably don't want your kids to fail. And so having a plan B is like, okay, that's not failing. That's just like another plan. But yeah, I'm sure that it was, she knew that I could, she truly believed that I could do it too, just because of the type of person that I am. And so that has really been, I think, a huge part of the person I am today. Yeah.
Were there any times you remember doubting yourself in any conversations you had with your mum, or was that kind of something that was always there?
Oh no, absolutely, definitely. And I've always experienced that doubt before. And I think that having her as like a sounding board and almost just making it not a big deal, like, you'll figure it out, you know, is calming in a way. Like, oh yeah, I will figure it out. And maybe it won't go exactly, you know, plan A, perfect case scenario, but whatever challenges arise or whatever, you know, roadblocks come up, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, we're going to use that the phrase kind of ultra realist as we go through this, but that ability to scramble and that ability to say, oh, you know what, it's going to be okay, I'm going to figure it out. That seems like something that was embedded in you from an early age.
Absolutely.
So until kind of the end of college, it seems like your life is fairly well focused at like, okay, sports and athleticism, and like kind of it seems to be the primary thing. Was it biomedical or biomechanical engineering?
Biomedical. Yeah.
Okay, so what drew you to biomedical engineering?
I think that you're right in saying that the athletics really drove me as a younger kid, but I think that the even bigger picture was just, I really like challenges, and I like doing things that other people are either scared to do, or they can't do, or they give up early or something like that, and really just being able to take on those challenges. And so I think that's why I like so many different activities, because it was like, oh, this is different. Like, how can I get good at this? And the same was true with school too. I did really well in school, and I definitely had a liking towards the science and math aspect of it, just because they're very much challenge oriented. You know, how do you solve this problem? And developing those problem solving skills through those subjects, I just kind of leaned towards them. And I think it was probably, I was taking an anatomy class in high school, and we went to this genetics conference, which was kind of talking about, I don't even remember the specifics of it, it was so long ago, but just talking about like regenerative medicine and just kind of this new age of medicine with like tissue engineering and organ engineering and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, that like really captivated me. And so I think that experience plus just the love of science, math, and challenges, I was like, well, what does that fit under? And that was biomedical engineering. It's like, this seems like a really tough degree that has aspects that I'm interested in, and let me see if I can do it.
So within that kind of that bigger challenge, what were the smaller challenges that you remember facing within it?
Oh my God. Well, it was definitely a very big shock, like going from high school where I definitely worked hard for school, but it was easy in a way. Like I didn't really learn how to study or take tests or balance really difficult subjects. So when I went to school, it was essentially the same thing that happened on the cheerleading side as well. Like now I'm at a university where everybody was at the top of their class. Everybody's really hardworking. Everybody's smart and came from a lot, you know, I feel the same way. Is like I was like one of the least talented people, and you know, maybe that's just my perception of it. But so that was very much a shock when I started school, especially with engineering. Most degrees you have to take between like 18 and 20 credits every single semester. Like a lot of other degrees, you only have to get like 40, I forget the numbers, but significantly less credit hours to get that degree. And then you kind of just fill in with like extra degrees, extra majors, minors, and stuff like that. But the engineering degrees, at least at Miami, were like pretty much your whole schedule is booked from freshman to senior year with like very little choice. And so it was a huge class load, and my classes were extremely tough. And so I really felt for many semesters like I was just barely staying alive. Like I got my first semester, I think I was overplaced in my math class, so I got like a D, and then I ended up, they have like a program, I think most schools do, where you can like retake a class if you get a lower grade your first semester, and then it's like freshman forgiveness. And so I had to like retake that class, and a lot of those classes are, you know, the weed out classes, so they're just 200 people in a lecture hall, and you just show up and your grade is either 100% the final or 50% the midway exam, and then 50% the final. So it's just very different than the type of school that I was used to. And honestly, the whole time I was in school, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it or not, but I'm just going to keep going and keep trying. And eventually I'll either get like too far to like, yep, I'm like failing and I need to change my plan, or, you know, the last 2 years of school, I definitely felt like I was like pushing through that threshold of like, okay, I'm getting better grades. The classes are much more interesting and like specific to the degree. And I was doing a lot better then.
Yeah. So there's obviously like loads of technical skills you learned. Like, what are those lessons that you took out? Like, because there's a lot of challenge within that, and quite often we do things and we don't really realize why we're doing them and how they're going to apply to everything else that we do in life. How do you apply the kind of the non-technical lessons that you learned in what you do today, or do you see kind of like from similar or similarities in what you did back then and what you're doing now?
I think it's very similar in a lot of ways. And I think the technical things that you learn in school, you forget those very quickly, you know, because you're just learning so much and it's for a very short amount of time, and you're not really ever applying them unless you're in certain special cases. But most of the time you're just learning and regurgitating on the test and then moving on to the next thing. So I truly believe that the biggest things that I learned from school are the bigger concepts of facing challenges and perseverance and just keep going, really. Like that, honestly, that's what it felt like. Looking back on it was just like, whew, okay, made it past that semester, little break, and like, let's hit this next one and see what happens again.
So if you could take yourself back, go on, sorry.
I was going to say the biggest difference between that I've really noticed the last couple of years is that school is very much, 4-year degree, maybe it takes you 5 for whatever reason, but it's pretty much set out. Like if you pass the classes, like you're going to make it. It's very like, it's more of a clear path. Whereas like once you get outside of school, and what I've experienced in my, CrossFit career is just that it's not as clear, and you could be passing all the classes and, you know what I mean? Like that was a quote for the podcast, like metaphorically passing all your classes, showing up every day and giving your best effort, but it's no guarantee that you're going to metaphorically graduate or reach your goals. And so I think that is where creating goals that are not necessarily outcome dependent comes in, and redefining success and what that means. Like when I was in school, it's like, okay, success is graduating, getting my degree, passing my classes, whatever. And then when I switched, okay, my goal is to make it to the CrossFit Games, but that goal is not truly in my control, because it's based off of what other people are doing. And so that has been the journey that I've been on the last couple of years of like, what is success then if I'm not in control of that goal? Am I going to be constantly like chasing this goal that's like only partially controllable?
Nice. Let's dive into that, because that's a topic that goes deep. So on a micro level, say within a training session, when you're like, the temptation is to think, especially if we haven't trained our mindset, oh shit, like this isn't going well, then therefore I'm not going to perform this comp, or I'm not going to get to the body image goals that I have, or I'm not going to get to that lift that I'm aiming at. How do you remind yourself of the process-based goals and kind of who you're becoming in those moments?
Well, I think it's just like the physical training, it's a practice every day that you have to commit to. And I think this move has been a really big eye opener in a way for me, because for the last, I don't know, year and a half that I've been with Mindset Rx, or 2 years maybe now, I was doing the work every day, pretty consistent, sometimes miss days or have a bad week or something where I wouldn't be as consistent, but overall was very consistent. And then after semifinals, before semifinals, I was like the most dialed in I've ever been. And I felt like I really had the best experience mentally and physically in a competition. And of course, after a big event like that, like I think everyone needs a little bit of a break and a reset. And for me, I had a lot of things that like kept coming up in that break. So I did the testing for the games, and then I was on the demo team, and then we moved, and then I was on vacation. Now I'm back, and then I took another trip. And so it's been very choppy for me. So I haven't been as consistent with my journaling and my mindset work. And I feel like, not that I'm back at square one, but I'm like, I don't have that mental control, I guess, that I used to. And so that it's been good in a way, I think, to show me that maybe I was like taking that work for granted a little bit. And I think that's true for any type of consistent work you do, whether it's physical, nutrition, and anything like that. And so to answer your question in the long way, it's just about practicing. And for me, I've luckily found you guys, Mindset Rx, to have, a coach, but also just like the daily prompts and different books to read. And so all of that together is kind of like what my daily practice looks like.
It's a difficult thing to do, to remind yourself of that kind of end, to take yourself away from that end goal, and because we're often taught, especially in the CrossFit community as well, it's quite achievement focused, as in like plates on a barbell, places at a competition, leaderboards in the CrossFit box. It's definitely a challenging thing to do. Was there a time in your life when you did fall into that trap of kind of comparison, or into that trap of like judging yourself by the leaderboard?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that probably every athlete goes through that in one degree to or another. And I think for me, when I started CrossFit, it was I got really good really fast, and it was like very linear. So like, this year, and that's kind of how the open is marketed too, like test your fitness to see how much better you get each year. And while that's true for people who are very beginners, I don't think that's as true once you get to a certain level. I don't think that your ranking is necessarily means that you're more fit or less fit than you were the year before. Because there's so many variables of how many people have signed up, who signed up, and especially at the top, it's what workouts came out, it's a big factor in there. So for me, it was very linear the first 3 or 4 years that I competed. I was missed competing as an individual at regionals in 2015. So I did a team. 16, I placed high enough to be an individual. And I think I got like 20th or something at regionals. And then 17, I placed even higher in the open, and I got 7th at regionals. So 18, I was like, all right, like this is my year. I was only 2 spots away. Every year I've like linearly progressed. So the only spot to go is the games. And so like I really put a lot of pressure on myself that year to like, well, of course I'm going to make it to the games. Like, and if I don't, what does that mean? Like, I've been working hard and I'm better than I was last year. And, but I think that just all that expectation that I put on myself was just kind of like paralyzed me in a way. Before I even went to regionals in 2018, I knew that I wasn't going to make it, even though I felt like I should make it. And I felt that I would be letting myself down or other people down if I didn't make it. But I was just so far, like the pressure was just like crippling me almost. And I did the regionals. It was probably my worst experience competing. Like the whole time, I just was not having fun. I was dreading every workout. I was dreading every time that I had to go out on the floor and warm up, and just not an enjoyable experience. And so that was kind of like the big pivotal moment, I think, for my career, was just like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. And I'm not progressing on this like linear path that I thought that I would be. So like, it was really questioning my reality and these stories that I had created for myself. And of course, I wasn't able to, be like, oh, this is what I have to do now and figure it out in a day. Like, I feel like I'm still on that process of why am I doing this? And how do I define success through ways that are completely in my control? And how do I basically be confident in, like, committed, I guess, to that path of success? Because I think that no matter how much mindset work you do, that there's probably still always going to be that pull of like, well, I still want to beat that other person. And of course, that's why I think all the competitive, we're all competitive, right? Because we're doing a competitive sport. But just, I think it's a journey of recognizing when that is taking away and versus when that's helping you.
Yeah, the competition's a funny one because it is such an important driver. And it's like, if it wasn't such an important driver, we wouldn't feel emotionally connected to it and it wouldn't be meaningful to us. But it has this point where it reaches that pressure and the fun goes away from it. And it's usually when we start to have expectations of, this is what I'm going to achieve. But I found it so interesting that you said that you, on one hand, were putting pressure on yourself and expecting to get to the top 5 regionals that year. But you also knew that you weren't going to get there. And it's just like these two beliefs that are confronting each other, and they're paradoxical. I think that also a lot of people think that an athlete of your level might not get that, and they might think that that doesn't apply to you. But like, so what's it like to be in that? Just so kind of we all know that it's a very similar thing. Like, what does it feel like for you to, or what did it feel like for you to be in that place?
It was really frustrating, because like I felt like I, in a sense, like deserved it, which, not to say that I didn't, because I worked hard for it, but I don't think that I think there's more than the physical aspect that goes into being it. And also at the I guess you could say like the bubble level of athletes who are, not making it to the games and making it to the games, like there's a lot of factors that are out of your control. The best of the best, like the Tias and the Mats, like they're going to make the games no matter like what workouts come up, who shows up. But I feel like there's a lot of, at least where I was at then, is like the workouts were heavily dependent, or like me making it were heavily dependent on like what kind of workouts showed up, because I had some weaknesses and still have some weaknesses. And just really the mental state that I was in. And like, I don't know if I was as mentally fit as I am now, would I have made it then? But I know for sure the mental aspect hindered my performance, because I just was not able to really push through those hard moments. It was more of like proving that negative story right. Like, oh, I knew I wasn't going to make it. And so not really giving up, but just not being able to like break through, like, and believe in myself, I think.
Yeah, it's funny how they become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
These beliefs of like, okay, maybe I'm not going to make it, or I'm not good enough to get there, or like
Yeah.
maybe it's not my year. We know we're acting in accordance with it, but we still do it anyway. And like, what's the difference between that and now you're a bit further down your journey of mental fitness?
I think that it's still there. And I think that's been the humbling part of like kind of taking this break from the mindset work that I have, is like, I felt very confident in myself and my physical abilities, and just like my outlook on training and competing. And now that I'm back to training, and I'm here in Vegas, and we have like a very competitive training group, it's I feel those like kind of old ways, or we call them, bound natures, coming into play, and I'm like not as aware of them as I was before. And so they're getting to me in a way, more so than they used to. And so it's what the question was, what is the difference between
When you're kind of like, you've turned up that mental fitness and you're feeling like, okay, yeah, I'm really in there, kind of as fit as I can be mentally and originally.
So I think that it's always there, but you're just able to understand that that's not, ultra realism. Like, it doesn't have to be true just because your mind is doubting yourself. It's like, yeah, that's a normal thing to think, but then what if I thought almost the opposite as well? Like, that is just likely to be true. And so just being able to be really aware of what's going on, and not just allowing it to happen.
It gives you a certain perspective, having this awareness that you're generating. It's like, oh, I can see my mental state, my self-talk, my emotional state, like what I'm imagining, even the kind of the physical state that my mentality is putting me in, and being able to recognize that gives you that little bit of space. It's an interesting thing. Go on, sorry, you're about to say something.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think that there's no difference, but it almost like closes the gap to be a little bit shorter. So for example, like, if your reality is not matching up to your expectations, you kind of go through this like grieving state of like, oh, like I'm not as good as I thought I was, or as good as I should be, or whatever that is. And when you are able to recognize that, and you're more mentally fit, you're able to quickly be like, okay, well, this is my reality. Like, how can I make the best of it? Whereas when you're out of practice a little bit, it takes longer and it takes more effort to be like, okay, you know, what are my values? What are my goals? How can I shift my perspective and change my, you know, accept my reality, essentially.
Yeah. Yes, the difference between these things being top of mind and them being fully sunk down into our subconscious so deeply that we can't separate them from reality, and they become our reality. And it's like, it's so interesting that you're mentioning about these kind of peaks and troughs of mindset work. And sometimes, like, I do it, we all do it, we go through these phases of like really nailing everything, like having these conversations that develop our mentality, journaling consistently, meditating, like breath work, whatever it is for you. Like we go through these steps, and like they have these peaks and troughs of like productivity there. But the key thing is that we're always conditioning our mentality. So we are training it whether we realize it or not. So if we are just letting the world happen to us and taking that on, that's conditioning our mindset. That is training our mindset.
Yeah.
But so is sitting down with the journaling. It's like, which training are you going to give it? That's the...
Yeah, you're either moving towards it or away from it at all times. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think it's, in a way, like I think this time has been valuable, though. Like, even though I might have taken a couple of steps backwards, you know, just seeing how it's affected me is very reassuring in a way too. I think that, and you know, it's not that I was like, oh, I figured it out now, but it just like recognizing that it is truly a daily practice. It's not something that you just like, okay, I understand that, or like a flip a switch or something. It's very much like you have to keep practicing it to stay fresh.
Well, there's two kind of parallels to our physical training there. One being that you adapt to the stimulus that you're given, and the other thing being like that success isn't linear. Like, I don't know about you, but my back squat hasn't progressively gone up every single month for my life. Like there's times when I get under a bar, I'm like, what is, like, it feels like there's twice as much weight on there. So like it's the same kind of thing. We adapt, like, and things take a lot of time. So I want to dig into a few moments of competition, or kind of maybe significant events that have happened. Talk to me about West Coast Classic, and your goals going into this in a kind of, is it a more recent year once you've been working with Rachel and us guys?
I think that I had a few goals, but one of my biggest goals was to regain my love and enjoyment for competition. And everybody's different, but I feel like me personally, I really thrive when I'm having fun. And so, and in a lot of ways, fun sometimes is understood to be the opposite of taking things serious, but I personally don't feel that way. And I know that I do my best when I can perform my best when I'm having fun and enjoying the experience, being present. And so I really just wanted to have fun at the competition because I knew that would be best for me. And I wanted to give my full effort, like, you know, my best effort on every single event, regardless of like what place I was in overall or in the event. And so I think those were probably like my two main drivers of whether it was going to be a successful competition or not. Obviously, you know, I still have the goal of like wanting to make it to the games, and but those were like the two things that I was really like dialed into about defining whether this was going to be successful or not. And there's a sense of power in like being able to set those success markers to things that are truly in your control. And so like in moments when I would be doing a workout and I would, you know, they always start to hurt at some point, and being able to be like, okay, like, what am I going to do now? Like, am I going to keep pushing through because my goal is to give my best effort and work as hard as I can, no matter the outcome? Or am I going to kind of like I did more so at 2018 regionals of like, you know, surrender to that self-fulfilling prophecy of like, oh, I'm not good enough. So like, I knew this was going to happen, and step back. And so I really felt like I did accomplish that. And there was, you know, every event kind of has its own little story and ways that I overcame challenges, whether that was like prepping for the event or like actually out on the floor. And I really did have the most fun that I think I'd had at any competition. And I don't know how I did that specifically, but just I think creating that as a goal, and it's very like true to myself too. I think sometimes people, or at least I can only speak for myself, but like you see, you know, athletes and serious athletes, and that's, I think, something like a bound nature that I have like discovered of myself, is like, I feel if I act a certain way, I won't be taken as like a serious athlete, or serious athletes do X. And so I have to also do that. And so I think maybe just letting go of those preconceptions, or I don't know what the right word is, but, and just really living true to myself. Like, I like laughing, and I like, you know, making jokes, and I like sometimes even just being like, oh, like when you're feeling that pain, instead of saying, oh, it really, really hurts, like, this is, I will think to myself, this is such a unique experience that I'm getting to live right now. And you know, saying that I always come back to is, it doesn't have to be fun to be fun. And so that always just like kind of is like, yeah, like everybody in the crowd right now, they're just standing there and watching, you know, their heart rates are low, and I'm like suffering, and for whatever reason, I can just like flip that perspective of like, this is cool because it's different and it's hard and it's fun.
You found that challenge and difficult things are your primary drivers. Like that's why it's so important to figure out, okay, who am I? Like, what's my self-knowledge? Like, it's so important to develop self-knowledge, because you're figuring out what is it that really like gets me going in terms of like physical output, in terms of like ambition, and also what kind of turns me off in this area as well. It's like, okay, because for some people fun might work. For other people, that kind of constant pain and discomfort and like, I hate this, that might be their driver, but like may not be the most serving driver, but it could be the driver for them. That's really cool. What does the
so
word
maybe feeling like you don't have to fit into a certain mold of like what works for certain athletes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like you consider the difference between my life and your life and all the influences that have gone into that. Like, yes, we share like kind of similar aspects of culture, and yes, there's like certain things that that we're probably going to be similar, but there's no way that our drive is going to be the same. Like every experience that we've ever had, every experience our ancestors had, there's no way that we're going to like fit in exactly with this. And that's why there's a one size fits one approach. Like, it's all about you. That's something you do particularly well as well. You adapt and you figure out what you do, and that's one of the things Rachel said you do very well as well. It's like you're very introspective. You're willing to look at challenge and difficulty and be vulnerable in light of that. I think it comes from that self-knowledge.
Yeah, I think that being vulnerable is something that I don't know where I learned that. I mean, we probably learn the most stuff from our parents, but just that's one thing that I've always felt like has given me success in anything that I do, is I don't feel afraid to just kind of put myself out there and fail. Like, I'll be the first person to just be like, I'll try it. And I don't have any ego around that, like that trying and failing, or because I feel like that's how I learn, or putting myself in vulnerable or exposing situations, you know, like moving out to Vegas and being, you know, getting last place on almost everything every day. But because I know that's how I've always gotten better, and that's the type of environment that I've been able to just get the most out of by just being a sponge and like looking up to these people who are better than me. Same goes with, you know, when I was on Top Gun, like I felt like I was saying before, like kind of just surrounded by people who are all better than me, and same in school. And so I really thrive in those environments, but of course not everybody does.
Who or what do you think taught you that relationship with vulnerability?
I mean, I feel like it's got to stem from my parents and my upbringing, but just I think having the, like, them never putting any type of like judgment on me or expectations on me. So I always, and also just that confidence and like, you can figure it out, like, I think is probably the main driver of that. You know, I tried all those sports in high school. I had never done them my whole life, but just knew that I was athletic and could probably figure it out. And so I think that, and then the confirmation of like, oh, I'm actually like okay at this for only learning it for a couple months. And so just building that confidence of like, okay, I might suck at first, but that's the quickest way to learn. And also getting to experience unique opportunities. Like if I never put myself out on the golf team as the only girl on the team, you know, who'd never played golf before, I wouldn't have gotten those experiences and those lessons that I did. And same for all the other sports that I played or other clubs that I did.
That's a great relationship to have with failure.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're looking for. It's like, okay, great, this is an opportunity. Like this is the obstacle is the way. Like the thing that stands in the way is the most effective way to get to where I want to go and become who I want to be. Like it's there for a reason. And that kind of flip of perspective on between this is something that's preventing me to get where I want to be to this is something that needs to be there in order to get to where I want to. That's a really different way to live.
Yeah, and I had never really thought of it that way. That's just kind of like who I was, I think, growing up. And I actually remember this like very distinct conversation that I had in college. I was a resident assistant, and as like a team bonding thing, we all went like ice skating. And I had done ice skating when I was like 2 years old for like a year. So I'm not like an experienced ice skater. I had been on the ice before, but we went and I was kind of just like messing around, like going out, I'd fall and like try to do like little tricks and stuff like that. And I was just having a good time. And afterwards, my friend, she was like, that's something that I've always admired about you. Like, you're not afraid to just like go out and like fall. And I was like, oh, I never like thought of it that way. You know, with ice skating, it's very literal, like you're gonna fail and you're gonna fall on your ass. But I had never really thought of it that way until she brought it to my attention. And instead of, you know, just going around the edge where I'm safe, I'm just like, I'm going for it. And again, that's what I find is fun.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
such
all those drivers.
That's such a lovely example. There's a book, Bounce, by Matthew Syed, who, like, the idea, well, that book was one of the books that changed my life. It was like introduced to me by a PE teacher who kind of went, oh, this is a topic that like is really important, and it's nothing to do with the curriculum, but it's important to learn. Essentially, it introduced the idea of a growth mindset, before Mindset by Carol Dweck came out. Like, this was kind of the one that pushed into that territory. And there's an example in there, I think it's in this book anyway, and I don't know which ice skater it is, I don't know which competition it is, but they were just like the elite of the elite in ice skating, and they calculated how many times that she must have fallen in order to get there, and it was like 1 million plus times. They averaged it out, they kind of put some maths together, and I was like, okay, that's 1 million falls to get you to where you want to be. And it's like a different relationship with failure again. It's like, this is something that needs to happen.
Yeah, and it's so true. Like, if you only do things that you know you're going to succeed at, you're never pushing that boundary of what is possible. So I think that's probably, you know, where that stems for me. It's like, well, maybe I could do that. You know, it's like creating those goals that are just right outside your comfort zone that you have a possibility of completing, but you're not 100% certain.
Exactly. And if I was going to ask you about those moments in your athletic career that kind of provided the most meaning to you, that provided the most kind of that you're like, these are my favorite moments, these are the things that define me, I'm guessing there would be those parts that were not entirely easy or not
Yeah,
predictable.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that I'd probably have to spend some time thinking about it, but yeah, just moments in, you know, thinking of like CrossFit, some of the best moments that I've had in my CrossFit competitions are just when I didn't have expectations for myself and I was able to just go out, be present, and give my best effort. And oftentimes I was surprised by what I could do. And I think it's one of those things where if you force it and you have those expectations, that you're almost like trying too hard, and that is getting in your way. At least that's what I've felt. And so kind of embracing that mindset of like, I don't care. Obviously I do care about you know, my performance, and this is like my whole life, but letting go of that expectation of like having to do a certain way. And for me, that's allowed me to truly do my best.
Yeah, it's back to that golf example. Like you can rip and just smack it as hard as you can, but often it's going to
Yep.
go for a nice
Yeah,
slice, or as I like to call it, a power
absolutely.
fade.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
cool. So it was one of those moments where you were in a real flow state where you weren't forcing. Was that a time that you overtook Brianna Wallins in a sled event? Do you remember that?
Yes, actually that whole that event has like a nice little story to it, which I think I shared on my Instagram. But so that was one of the events. It was, I think, the last event that they announced before competition. So there was very little time to test it out. I think I had basically like one day to test it out, and then I was going to start my rest for the competition. And I didn't know how the deficit was going to go. I'm pretty good at handstand push-ups, but strict deficit sometimes are tricky for me. So I kind of felt like I was practicing it, and I was like, I feel like I should be able to do this many reps unbroken. And so I tested it out, quickly hit a wall, and was extremely frustrated, like stopped, you know, was crying, like again, because my reality was not matching up to, or my expectations were not meeting up with my reality. So I was like, I thought I should be able to do this many, but I'm only able to do this many. But like I said, I felt like I was so dialed in to that at that moment that within seconds, I was like, okay, well, this is my reality. I can't do that many that I thought I could. So how many can I do? And how can I minimize my total time for, forget the reps, but say it was 12 reps. I can't do 12 unbroken. I can't do 6 and 6. So what happens if I do sets of 3 with a short rest from the get-go? And I basically timed out, okay, I have to rest this many seconds, kick up, do 3, come down, rest this many seconds, kick up, do 3. And that's actually a pretty good time. Like that's much faster than I was trying to do 6 and 6 or whatever it was. And so I was able to really just shift my mindset and be like, okay, this is what I can do, and this is how I can make the best of what I can do right now. I would love to be able to do 12 unbroken, no problem, but that's not the case, and won't be the case in 3 days from now. So that event was very much like, I have to stay in my lane. And I knew, I think the reps go up, I think, on that one.
Remember.
Yeah, I think the reps went up. So it was very easy to get like baited into like going too fast, especially with a movement like a strict handstand push-up, which if you've ever done, you know, once you hit a wall, there's not really like, you can't really push through. It's just like total muscle failure. So I knew I just had to be really disciplined on that, and went in, I think it was like bottom half of my heat on like the first 2 rounds. And I was just like, but I wasn't even aware of that. I was just like, this is my plan, and this is what I'm sticking to. Notice on the 3rd round, I was like kind of sneaking up towards the front. And by that last round, I just was so committed to my plan. I was like, okay, I got to push the toes to bar, which I know that I can basically go to failure there, and then really like push it out on the sled. But it was so key on like those first 3 rounds of sticking to my plan of, and the discipline of not coming out too fast on those handstand push-ups, and, you know, having somebody who's right there with you, of course, is one of the amazing things of competition, where you get to, you know, ride that line and go back and forth a little bit with someone. And so that was a really cool story from start to finish, where like you know, the outcome was, you know, pretty good. I won my heat and pretty good placing overall, but it started from a place of like struggle. You know, I was literally crying when I practiced it, because I was like, oh, I can't do it, I'm broken, so I'm gonna fail. Like, and so I think that one was probably the biggest, one of the biggest wins from that competition, of just being able to be like, yeah, embrace my reality and then make the best possible outcome from it.
Nice. Have you heard of the OODA loop?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's this theory from fighter pilot school, whereas if you got 2 planes in a dogfight and they're kind of trying to shoot each other down, the pilot that can go through the OODA loop quickest is the one that wins. And OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. So what you did there was an exact OODA loop. You observed the situation, you saw you're like frustrated, emotional about it, you saw the facts that, okay, I can't do this, I'm broken, and you quickly observed it, and then you orientated. You mentioned like, okay, I'm going to orientate myself to success. Like, so what do I want to do? I want to get the quickest time possible in this event. It doesn't matter how quickly I'm getting through these reps, but it matters about the total reps. So it's like, okay, I've orientated myself. You made a decision, you act on it, and the quicker we can go through these tasks, the quicker we develop. So that's really cool to see that you did that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, had I not learned that and practiced that skill, I think I easily could have just walked out of the gym that day when I was upset and been like, well, I'm just going to suck at that event, or hopefully I'll be able to do it the day of, which, you know, you're not going to be able to do it.
Hope isn't a strategy.
Yeah, exactly. I just knew that I had to practice what was gonna work for me and essentially give me the best possible outcome.
Yeah. So this is all part of being, exactly. Those last 2 words are essential as well. It's like for you. So this is all part of being an ultra realist. Has that been your mantra at one point?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that just kind of going back to that was like, I was able to find this calmness before semifinals of like, if I've been doing all the right things, training, preparing for the last however many months. And if I commit to, like I said, one of my goals was just giving my best effort on every single event, and doing as much as I could for recovery in between events, preparation, I would get the best possible outcome that was possible for me. And so there was kind of that pressure that came off. It was like, if that best possible outcome is in the top 5, great. But if it's 9th place, then I know that that's all I could do, really. And so there was no like, I don't know, frustration in my placing, because I just felt so fulfilled and that I did everything that I could, I guess.
Nice. And it's interesting as well that you're mentioning about like, okay, it didn't matter about my placing because of the fulfillment, because like what we're all trying to do at the end of the day to achieve anything is change our mental state. We're trying to change those thoughts, those emotions, those feelings. Like all we're trying to do is modulate that. That's why we do anything. That's why we train. That's why we drink. That's why we socialize. That's why we sleep. Like we're trying to change our mental state. So like the fact that you're recognizing like this helped me change my mental state and it helped me feel fulfilled, like that is the ultimate goal that we're trying to get to. And if you can get that through whatever level of output, however that looks to the outside world, then does it really matter? But alongside that, how do you find your competition changes or your performance changes when you are in that kind of, I've dropped my expectations?
like I said, I feel like that's when I'm able to perform my best. And one of the ways that I kind of figured that out was that I was looking back, especially with sanctionals, when they had that format, there was a lot of opportunities to compete. And I was finding that no matter what, the last event of every competition was like my favorite event. Some of them were short, some of them were long, some of them had gymnastics, some of them were no gymnastics. Like there was really no common theme in those style events besides that they were the last one. And so I was like, well, what could that be? Is it? And I feel like it's because at that moment on the last event, I was no longer within range of meeting my results goal of, making it to the games or qualifying to the next level. So I was able to just say, well, this is the last one. I got to give it my best effort. And I know I'm not going to, make my goal, but I still want to, live true to my character and work hard and have fun. And it was basically just removing all of that expectation and pressure. So I felt like that was a really big eye opener for me of like, how can I try to embody that mindset from event one? And so it's harder to do when there's still a possibility of like, reaching that results goal. And there's a lot of unknowns throughout the weekend that are going to come up, but trying to embody and switch my perspective of one, this event is, I'm just going to do my best on this event regardless of the outcome. And so I think that, I forget what the original question was, but
so good.
That
we got to the point I was looking for anyway. Like they can the performance shifts, and you feel better, but the releasing yourself from the outcome, the dropping the pressure is what's important there. Like it's funny, like how we think we need pressure to perform, and sometimes a little bit of pressure is good. Like sometimes it it helps you find that little bit of extra edge, but across 7, 8, 9 events, like it's really not gonna be maintainable.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that's kind of like the, really good athletes, quote unquote, perform well under pressure. And so I would always feel almost guilty of like, well, why can't I perform well under pressure? Why do I perform best when I take that pressure off of myself? And so that was a little bit of kind of like we were talking before of like the fun of, professional athletes who are good have to be serious and, they're tough under the pressure. But maybe they're tough under the pressure because they're able to figure out a way to take the pressure off of themselves. And and again, just finding what works for you. Just because another athlete is doing it doesn't mean that's the only way or the best way to do it.
Yeah, like you've really nicely inverted that as well. Like maybe it isn't because they're really good at performing under pressure. Maybe it's because everyone else is bad at performing under pressure and it just makes them look good. And maybe it's because they know how to not feel the pressure. That's the interesting thing there.
Sure.
Part of what is typically a pressure environment is preparing for a competition. You've obviously been working with Rachel, our head coach and co-host in our other format podcast, for a while now. Would you be willing to talk about how you prep for a competition with Rachel?
Yes, absolutely. I think that a lot of the work goes in before you're prepping for the competition. It's not just like a week out, you're like, okay, now we're going to start working on mindset. It's really learning those skills and applying them to your training, because the training is very similar to the competition. So being able to identify what stories are going to come up for you, what things are going to be, I guess, like negative things that are going to be happening, and being ready for those, I think. And for me, a big one is just like having something to prove almost. Like I've been competing for so many years now and been close to making it to the games. So I feel like I have to prove that I'm a legitimate professional athlete by making it to the games. And so that's like a huge story that I tell myself, and that puts the pressure on me. Like, no, I have to prove to you guys, like I am dedicated and I am doing all the work. And so just allowing that, like recognizing that and having the confidence, I think, in myself and the trust of like, I don't have anything to prove. I know the work that I've put in, and I'm fulfilled and confident with that work. And then also, more specifically, so those are kind of like bigger picture, like recognizing what's going to come up for you and like how do you essentially like bridge that gap and change your perspective. And also like zooming out, I think, was a big thing for me. It's easy to get caught up in, just like I said, putting my value was very much dependent on how I placed and making it to the games or not. But zooming out and seeing like, okay, well, what is my like 5-year goal, and how can this set me up for success for getting closer to that goal versus like winning this one workout. And then thirdly, which is more of like the micro level, will be when the events do come out, kind of like the handstand push-up one, like I was saying, what kind of expectations are you putting on yourself for that specific event? Maybe a certain aspect is tougher for you, so you kind of count yourself out, like, oh, I'm not good at that. For example, like the ruck run, I knew was going to be a really tough event for me because I'm not a great long distance runner, and I know that I've put in a lot of work in there, but it's just like not something that I'm naturally excel at. And so I think, and also that's a really long event to be just talking to yourself, 45 minutes of you're just running with a weight on your back, and there's not really a lot of thought that goes into it. And so just kind of preparing yourself for like, okay, when this comes up, like I know that I'm going to feel this way, but this is either how I can shift my perspective, or these are the goals that are in my control that I can remember and work towards. So I might be in last place or 20th place, but I'm going to like still, give my best effort. And for that one, for me, I was like, I'm just not going to walk. So I'm going to keep moving, and I'm going to like keep pushing and not walk. And so that one was extremely mental, because I started off the first lap. Everybody came out so fast, like running like a 6:30 mile pace. And I was just like, well, I wish I could run a 6:30 mile pace to start off a 4-mile run, but I know that I can't, especially with a ruck. So I'm going to stick to the pace that I know that I can run. And little by little, I started passing people, and people were walking, and it was very easy, like 2 laps in, to be like, well, this is going to be my place no matter what for the next two laps, because it's under the assumption that everybody else knew their pacing and was going to be able to stick to that. But just staying tough and being like, well, I'm just going to keep holding the pace that I know I can hold, regardless of what everybody else is doing. And I ended up moving up like 10 places throughout that event just by holding on to that. And it wasn't a great placing for me, but had I done the first lap and I was basically in last or second to last place, had I just kind of given up, like, well, I'm going to get last anyways. And it's especially when you're in a competition with so many events, like I was like, well, should I just save myself, the energy to push through the later events where I know I can do better. But then that was in violation with my goal. My definition of success going in was that I was going to give my best effort no matter the outcome. And so, no, I wasn't just going to give up and get last place. I was going to just keep pushing, working as hard as I could. And, it ended up working out pretty well for that event.
Yeah. And paradoxically, when we focus on just giving your best effort, that's when the best results come. It's really cool to see you doing that. Yeah, love that. The emotional awareness to begin with, the kind of the way you kind of, you recognize the desire to kind of race off, you recognize that was out of kind of a scarcity mindset almost, that would have driven
Yeah.
that, but you're like, okay, I'm going to sit back and race my own race and do what's in my control, which is exactly this, and execute the plan. Nice, really good. Why did you decide to begin working with Mindset Rx'd?
I think, like I was saying earlier, in 2018, when I kind of had that, I don't know if it was a wake up call, but just kind of like this realization that like my physical training is no longer linear. And then also, I think, you know, when you are linearly getting better and better, it's a little bit easier it's less challenging on your mind, because you're like, yep, I'm putting in more work and I'm getting better and I'm seeing the results and I'm seeing the outcome on the leaderboard. It's very easy to measure. And then in 2018, I was like, well, am I getting better? Like, and it was just a lot more complicated, I felt like, on the mindset side. And so I think that I was just kind of still struggling with that mismatch of my mindset a little bit. And I felt like also when I first started CrossFit, you know, there's so much to get better at, and you know, you have bigger weaknesses than others. And so I felt like I was to a point where I was doing everything right that I could. Like, I had a coach and I was working really hard and my nutrition was pretty dialed in, and but I just felt like I was kind of neglecting this like mindset portion of it. And so was getting more curious, had heard various athletes kind of talking about mindset work. And so that's why I started working with you guys. And I think that in retrospect, I wish I would have done it sooner, because I think that it does play a big part. And like I've mentioned before, it's definitely a practice that you have to like be consistent with. And that's also, that same mindset has what's led me to now to Vegas, is like, I feel like, okay, I've got now the mindset, the nutrition, the training. Okay, but like, what about environment? So it's just kind of like the next stone to like turn over. And that for me is like, I think my ultimate goal is like, I want to be an athlete who, looking back on my career, I felt like I didn't leave any stone unturned. And I really was curious to figure out what was going to work best for me, and how to maximize my essentially be the best athlete that I can be.
Nice. Like that seems to be the thing that drives a lot of athletes to work with us, is that kind of like, okay, I know I'm kind of not got the bases covered in these aspects, but I know I'm doing what I can, and it's like, how can I become better? What's the next step there? When I first signed up to working with my mindset mentors, way like years and years back, I was like, this feels like weird to be investing in this side of things. And I had like loads of doubts going through my mind about whether it would work, whether it was just a load of kind of witchcraft, whether like what is about, like, did you have any doubts about working with us, and kind of, do you remember how it felt to be starting that journey?
There was probably doubts, but I think I just, more than anything, I felt excited to learn something new and to try to improve in this area that I hadn't given much. I had dabbled a little bit in journaling, but I always felt kind of just lost. Like I would be like, okay, I feel like I should be journaling. I don't really know what I should write about. And so having that structure for me was, at the point that I found you guys, was exactly what I was looking for. It was just like, I need some structure to be like, and really what I think that you guys do really well is just creating like verbiage around this stuff. Like, I didn't know, I was experiencing all of these thoughts and yeah, all of these thoughts, but I wasn't able to be aware because I didn't have the language around it. So like recognizing like what is bound nature, free nature, and having these stories that I'm telling myself, and just creating that framework helped me understand it a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. And so I find that really useful to be able to say, this is this, like, if someone else has experienced it before, someone else has been through this process, and like that alone is often
and normalizing
enough.
it too. Like,
exactly.
Oh, this isn't just going on in my head. Like, this is normal.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's the wider purpose of Mindset Rx, is here to kind of broaden the topic of mental health. And it's not like some people have mental health issues. It's like we all have mental health, and we sit somewhere on the spectrum of it. And whether that's from like, or along that kind of continuum that Rachel talks about quite a lot, from sickness to health to fitness, the same as CrossFit's model. We sit in exactly the same model there. So we're all working on it, we're all conditioning it the whole time. What I'd like to wrap up with is, what are you doing on a regular basis to make your days count, to put you in the right headspace, to kind of to train your mindset?
I think what I know works best for me is having creating the time and space to have quiet time, so like meditation, breathing. And then I usually like to do that either before or after like my journaling. And so I really appreciate the Mindset RX prompts, or when we were getting closer to competition, they were more specific prompts of journaling and just exploring different things that would come up, and just being prepared for when I would experience those thoughts in training. So just making sure that I create the time and space to be focused on that, because I think if you try to just incorporate it, like if I would try to incorporate it when I'm training, it's just it's easy to miss out on or not give it my full attention.
Sweet. And then finally, to kind of practice aiming up, and because that's something we like to do, what's on the horizon for you? What are you excited about, and what are you working toward?
Right now, I'm really just working towards getting back to my daily routine. I think, like I had mentioned before semifinals, I was extremely disciplined, extremely dialed in on every aspect. And I needed a little bit of a break from that too. And I think that's my personality tends to be towards like plan and routine. And so it was really nice to just like let go of that for a little bit. And so I feel like I'm at a point where I'm craving that again. And I have, the next couple months that I don't have too much stuff happening. And so I can really refine those daily routines again. And because it feels overwhelming when you take a little bit of a break, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to get back on. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to journal. I'm going to do my breathing work. I'm going to be back on my nutrition. I'm going to get on my training, sleep. Like there's so many aspects. And so it's easy to feel overwhelmed. So I've just been having that grace, I think, with myself of, okay, this week I'm going to try to hit all my training sessions. This week I'm going to focus on like adding in my nutrition, and then just like kind of layering all of those pieces together, and not having like an all or nothing mindset is, I think, really helpful, of just like, oh, I like messed up that this week, but next week I know it'll be easier because I've layered on that consistency week over week. And that's how it was leading up to semis. I wasn't like, not doing any of that stuff and then all of a sudden dialed in. Like it had been a year and a half of me just like adding these things over and over till I got to this point where it was like all firing on all cylinders and really dialed in.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really nice place to wrap up, because it's like, it's so intentional, and it shows your intentionality and how you kind of build. And it's like, we need these cycles of tension and lack of tension. They kind of like, we built towards something, then we had to take the pressure off. It's a nice way to wrap things up. So to finalize things, where can people follow you on Instagram? Where can people find out a bit more about what you're working towards and support you?
Yeah, check it out. I'm mostly active on Instagram, which is Scudds. I have a little bit of a YouTube channel. I like to make vlogs, especially when I'm traveling and whatnot. And just keep up with me there on Instagram.
So thank you so much.